We're going to start. My name is Mary Scott, and I am the Chair Emeritus, or the Director Emeritus of the School of Graphic Design. I am now just teaching. I'm just a teacher. And I'm happy to say that over the last few years, I've welcomed architects, landscape designers to my class, and you're going to get to see some of the results of what that looks like when you put together a portfolio that's designed like a real book. I feel like I have a little credibility to work with architects because I worked for the firm that built the Transamerica building. I actually worked on that presentation and directed all the architects in doing the graphics for the presentation. So I understand a little bit about plans, elevations, sections, axonometrics, all those bird's eye, renderings, all the kinds of stuff that used to be done by hand. I think what drew me to architecture and to work in architecture was I just loved to watch how people could draw. This is back in the day now when everything, there were no computers. So anyway, I have a little handout for you, which is just kind of an overview of what creating a book is about. I'm going to kind of walk you through it. It's, you all know how to use computers, and the students that come to my class, I'm actually kind of drum up business for the fall, actually, because I want more architects. I'd like nothing more than have a whole class full of architects to teach, to prepare themselves to go out into the professional world. So the class really has a mission statement, which is to present yourself with your current and potential value as an architect or designer. Are you all architects? Okay, good. All right, that's a good thing. So, there comes a time when you're finished with your studies that you have to kind of package up everything and be able to take it easily to show someone. And there are many ways. You can buy a book that has plastic sleeves and slip-in sheets, but there's something magical about books. How many of you have a lot of books? I do. I don't know an architect or a designer who doesn't have a ton of books. We're kind of hardwired to love books. How many of you go to William Stout? Okay, it's dangerous for me to go in there because it's very addictive. I want to buy everything I see. So I'm going to hand out this, and it just tells you a few things just to think about. But basically, just pass them back. Basically, what we want to do, what the goal is to do, is to present your work in a cohesive fashion that's going to enable anyone to see what you're capable of doing. So you all know your projects backwards and forwards, but a stranger, and it probably would be an architect who would interview you, is not familiar with your work. So you have to organize it in a fashion that they can understand it and walk through it in a logical manner. We also in the class create a website and a complete set of materials, stationery, business card, resumes, one-sheets, all the things you're going to need to set up shop and get a job. Mark was just telling me that Nilu Golkarihag, I think that's how her name is pronounced, is studying for her master's at UCLA right now, and Mark said that her book was one of the things that helped get her accepted. Unfortunately, I only have her book digitally because it's been misplaced, but it's the same size as the other books. I will walk you through the process of the steps that you go through. I even have some files, some native files from one of the students, Ali Reza Arab Shahi, who was my student last year. And he was kind of give us his files so I could show you little things about layout right here in a live fashion. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to walk you through Nilu's book. So she came to my class with a sheet that had all her projects kind of in miniature on them, and so I could get a sense of what she was about. And she started the process of kind of putting the work together in a standalone narrative. Just like when you go buy a book at the bookstore, let's say the book is about Frank Gehry. He comes to mind right away. It's gonna be complete. You don't need Frank Gehry there to explain stuff to you because it has narrative text. It tells you the details, all the things that you're looking at. There's captions, and so everything is clearly communicated. So the idea of wrapping that up and tying it up with a bow of a book is a very powerful communication, because you can go on an interview and you can chat and talk, and then someone just takes your book. So they're actually, I feel it's a very interactive gesture to take someone's book, and then they start, now they're holding your work and they're saying, oh, what about this? This is interesting, asking you questions. So it sets up a very a conversation in a way that I think is very positive. I've heard from all of the former students that I've had in the class, Jessica Tangerman, Archer, Firouz is his last name, Michael Atwell. So it's really great to see that what they've learned has helped them. One student even said that when they went to work for an architectural firm, the firm made them do a book for themselves like he had done for himself. So it's a skill that will serve you going forward. You'll be able to make a book about anything. You'll just have a few little tips on how to make a book. Now, I couldn't teach somebody to be an architect in 15 weeks, but I can pretty much guarantee that in 15 weeks, if you come to my class, if you were to come to my class, you would walk out with a great looking book, you know, assuming that you had some great work to put into it. So we'll look at Nilu's book. Now I'm going to step over here and work this computer. I forgot my little magic pen. So this is a digital representation of Nilu's portfolio. It's about this, it's this exact same size. I don't have it here physically, but it's this size. So it's about 12 by 10 and a half by 12. And what's interesting about the fabrication of this kind of a book is there's a company called Blurb, and they're somewhere here in this, I think they're in New York. You design your book in InDesign, you send your files to them, and lo and behold, this book comes back in the mail, all done, printed, bound, ready to go. A lot of students that I teach, graphic design students in particular, they want to do fancy books with fancy bindings, so they'll go another route. But they have to go find a printer, and then they have to find a binder. But this is kind of one-stop shopping, and it's really handy. You can print images on the front and back, and it works just like a real book. It has end sheets and all that good stuff. So we're going to walk through Nilu's book. So this is the cover of her book, and she chose one of her experimental models to put on the cover. She chose the concept of process for her book, which is something we all use. Everybody understands that. You don't have to name your book, but most books have names, so it's not a bad idea to give your book a name. As you'll see with Ali's book, is called Workflow. So the name is part of the process of developing a sort of persona for your book. So there's the end sheets, there's her title page. Isn't this cool how the pages just flip? So here is her introduction to a project. So up here, right there, she talks about the name of the project, the course, the instructors, and any other details, and where the site is. So why would we name our instructors in a book like this? What would be the reason to do that? Anybody have an idea? Why?
Because they had influence on the development of the project.
Yes, of course. But you might be showing your book to someone who knows this person. And they say, oh, let's see who the instructor, oh, I know Paul, I can't read the last name, Geragard or something. So there's an instant networking and connection that comes up. So it never fails. So that little piece of information, and then this is the name of the project, and this happens to be her thesis, up here, just like in a real book, you have the name of the book, and then over here is her name, selected works of Nilu Fargo Karihag, and the years. And then over here, on this side, is always the project name. So after I open up this chapter, I will always know where I am. That's called persistent navigation. It just tells you where you are, because the stranger isn't going to know, oh, I'm still looking at the thesis. Over here, she has a project number, and over here, she has project number. And this is a brief description of the project. Now, if you looked at Michael Atwell's book, he had a lot to say. Most people don't want to write a whole lot, but you can say as much or as little as you want to, or that is necessary to make someone understand what the objective of this project was. She also chose the notion of showing herself at work. So these hands that you see are Nilu's hands, and now she unveils the project. So this navigation that I talked about stays there forever. And if you'll notice, there is what we call there are margins on the book. These margins are the same on top and side, but they're slightly deeper on the bottom. That's a choice you make, but margins are a really good thing. And once you see how a set of margins will organize a book, you'll also see that we decide where to put things, and then we stay there. Things just don't float around arbitrarily. So I'm just going to go on a few spreads, and I'll point out a couple things. So these captions are geared to these elements right here. So each thing has a little number on it and tells you what the caption is, because it's nicer than putting captions right under pictures. It's more artful. So these are some of the parts of the process. So one of the most difficult things to embrace for most architects or interior designers is negative space on a page. It frightens most people, because like, why should that be blank? Well, negative space is a very important thing in design, and you know that in your architecture you have to have negative space, or else you couldn't stand in it. So negative space in print design is really important. And also, what's important is to pace the images that you show. So we're not looking at the same thing all the time. Now we're looking at one type of sketch and some kind of close-up. Here again is our captions. And once you've set a style for the captions, you use that all the way through. Here's our little numbers, which tie into the captions. And then sometimes photographs will bleed. So bleed means the image runs off the page, but notice sometimes they don't. So that, again, is a choice you make depending on what looks best. And most of the time it looks really great to have margins around images. I think in this case it works really well. And I hope you can appreciate the balance of the page. Instead of these things being across, we leave some nice negative space here. We stack these elements, and then we have the large image. So there's contrast between scale. There's small things and there's large things. And that's just a particular habit of book design, is to show contrast. And then here we have a big bleed image going across 2 pages, which is a spread. So what you're not seeing here is the gutter in the book. The gutter would be right about here, which means that's where the book opens up. These are photographs of her models that she took, more models, and now here's another chapter which looks the same except the pictures changed, and this is Nilu on one of those windows, probably out there at the front, doing some tracing. So rough sketches of all sorts, important, whatever it is necessary to tell the story. I was very proud to hear that Nilu got accepted at UCLA because it has a really incredible reputation. I went to school there for a while, and it's rewarding. And so here's Nilu again. Now she's working on something else. She was actually inspired by a book that one of our graphic design students did. She saw it and she said, I love the idea of putting myself to work and actually showing that I'm actually using my hands. So these are little studies. See, what's nice about this is you get to put many things in that if you had to use boards or some other way of showing the work, it wouldn't be as facile as this. Does anybody have any questions? No. Looks easy, doesn't it? Well, there's an old saying, good design looks effortless. That doesn't mean it is effortless, just like a beautiful building should look effortless, but we all know it takes a lot of effort to do. So on and on and on and on and on. There she is again. So you set up a system by which the reader who doesn't know your work or doesn't know you automatically sees I'm going from one project to another. So there is there's a visual cue to tell me that I'm looking at a new project, whereas if they all kind of just went together, you wouldn't know that. Now, do you have to take pictures of yourself for your portfolio? Not at all. She chose to do that because she thought that would be a good way to present herself. Okay? So the good thing is, for the most case, there's not a lot of information that you have to deal with. The simpler the layout is, the better. And what usually is problematic with the way that people who haven't been trained to use typography correctly, they don't know all the subtle little details. And later I'll show you on a native file just the difference in setting type with a certain set of specs and another set makes it look better. Just, it's that simple. Because there's lots of rules about setting type. It has more rules than you can shake a stick at. So, there we go. So it's a lovely, I think it's a really lovely book, and very proud to have had Nilu in class. She was very, very wonderful to teach, and so as the other students. And at the end of the book, we always thank everybody who helped us finish all this up, meaning your studies, your friends, your family, your teachers. Saying thank you is one of the best things that you can do in life because it doesn't cost you anything, and it gets you so much. Many times teachers will see our students' portfolios and they'll say, "Oh, they thanked me," and they feel so good. So, and a colophon is all the details of a book. It's a book term, and what that is, it tells the school, the course, the bookbinder, the photographer. She gives credit to the photographer who took her pictures, the stock that the book was printed on, the text stock, the cover stock, the fonts that she used. She used Franklin Gothic and book medium, demi, heavy. There's some great faces that I think are good for these books. One of the things that a lot of people do that haven't studied typography is they think, I'm going to use a cool typeface. Well, cool typefaces are not where it's at. It's using classic type in a very, very systematic way. And that's the back of her book with her finishing. So if you want, just pop out of your seats and I'll show you physically a book so you can see it firsthand. I'm sorry I don't have Nilu's. I'm still hunting for it. So this is Ali Arabshi, who is now working for, I think it's Electric Energy or something in I just read the firm. So he chose an elevation of one of his projects and he wrapped it onto the back of the cover. It has a spine, just like a real book. You know, every book you buy in the bookstore has a spine and has a cover. And every book that's a real book has what we call end sheets. Oh, we're getting the image on here. I'm going to stand over here. So there's his title page. Here he talks about what he means by workflow. You want me over here? Is there a way that glare can be out of my, yeah, perfect, you did it. Thank you. See, asking you shall receive. So he explains what workflow is, and he actually dedicates the book. You have a table of contents, just like any real book that has information in it. And this is the beginning of a project. So he sets you all up. It's a little different from Nilu's, but it's clean, simple, and well done. Okay? It's not hard to do once you know the secrets of type and all the imagery that was needed to show for that project, various aspects, aerial views, models, floor plans, elevations, and full bleed photographs. And then I'm getting to the next project. I think this might have been his, no, it wasn't his thesis. He was working on his thesis while he was in the class. This is a long project. Okay, I think we're getting to the end here. And there we go. So notice the format is the same, it's just a different image. So that the reader instantly knows they're seeing, oh, this is a new project, okay? You know, when people are interviewing other people, you know, young designers, it's always time out of their day. So if you come prepared and you are able to present yourself in a polished way, it makes everybody feel a little better about the possibility of hiring you. Like Ali said that, you know, they saw this and they had never seen anything like this, and they were very excited. So they put him in charge of any kind of publication that they wanted to do, or printing work, you know, print work. So you can look at this also online. The site that I'm on is called Issuu, and ISSUU, and all you have to do is put in Nilu's name, Nilufar Golkari-Haq, and he is Ali Reza Arabshahi. So you can go home and study this spread by spread. But in all cases, it's got all of the, you know, the attributes of real books. Then the other thing that we do is we prepare the complete materials you'll need to send out letters, you know, asking for an interview. So there's his business card. I'm not going to unclip it because these are hard. Well, I guess I will. There's his business card. And it's all integrated. The same type that's used in the book is used here. This typeface is called DIN. It's a wonderful typeface. It's one of my favorites. And there's his resume. There's how he would write a letter if he were writing a letter to someone. And then his one sheets, which I think is pretty traditional in architecture. Just to get the interview, they want a one sheet, or sometimes for competitions, they want a one sheet. And then Ali also has a website where you can see all this stuff. So that's how people will see you initially, is on your website, because you'll use all these assets you create to make a website. These days, how many of you have made a website? There's all those templates now where you don't have to code. Thank God, you know. I would not have to learn to code at this point in time. So you have everything you need to promote yourself and approach any firm that you'd want to work for. This is Samantha Buckley. She called her book Just Touch. This is also on Issuu, so you can see this. She has a different layout. She's using a larger type, just having, simple statements and these captions, and that's basically the system for identifying everything. So, and Samantha, when she graduated, she had 2 very nice offers, but she chose Gensler Associates to work for, and I've seen her, and she's very happy there. So, she took all of these pictures of textures throughout the city, wherever she went. So, again, it's organizing the work in a methodical way. I mean, let's face it, architects have to be methodical, right? Because there's a million details to think about. So doing this is, again, showing that you have the ability to integrate information and know how to present it. So it's pretty nice. I have an older portfolio from a student. Oh, and let me show you Samantha's stuff. We call this collateral material. It's, everything. We even get down to the stamp, What should the stamp be? So there is her system and her one sheet. So it all mimics the system that's inside the book. And it's pretty sweet. So a long time ago, and this student I had many years ago, when the department first started, Mimi Sullivan said, "Would you take some of my students into portfolio?" So, this is before Blurb existed, so she didn't stamp the cover? Did she forget? I thought there was some stamp. Oh yeah, here it is. It's very, very subtle. It says, I think her name was Ariel Lowe. Okay, so this is a case-bound cover. This is book cloth, and then this is spiral binding. So that's her book. So this was done, I would say more than 10 years ago. But again, we couldn't do Blurb 10 years ago. It didn't exist. You could have it bound, but the spiral binding was a fairly inexpensive way to create a book. They're a little bit more cumbersome. So as soon as Blurb came along, the students really gravitated towards that. But I've got some architects right now. You guys know Alberto Esponda and Stefan Ulch? Yeah, well, they're wanting to explore doing different style books, and I'm hoping that they're going to see the light of day. Because Alberto says, "I want to do small books." I said, "Well, I don't know. You can't see too much if the book is small. You're coming to show your capabilities to someone who's going to want to see detail. What kind of detail do you do? And when the work is very small, it's hard to see." Then Michael's book is also on, Michael Atwell. His book is also on there. So here he's got a little story on the back. But again, all the work is presented. And I won't take your time to go through it page by page. You can look at all of this on Issue if you want to look more closely. The other thing I thought we'd do is we have some of Ali's files, raw files, and I can just show you the difference. I would like to really give you some clues about typesetting. Would that sound interesting to you? Some little tips so that next time you set type, you won't set it wrong. Because, graphic designers are really snobs about type. If type is set wrong, they go, ooh. So, who knows what tracking means in type? There's 2 words. Kerning and tracking refers to the space between letters, okay? The space between them. So you can control that in InDesign. So one of the things that we learn right away is you never want to set type too tight, meaning the letters should not touch ever. unless you were doing a logo for something that said collapse and you'd want them to touch. But good typesetting in any good book is set with what we call a little air between the letters. So just setting the type right. Also, the other thing that is a little mysterious is, well, where do you put things? So it's not unlike when you're designing a space in architecture, like you start out by just allocating space and where things are going to go. So it's quite similar to that very thing. If you look at a page as a canvas and use where you put things, changing the size of things really changes things. But organizing with margins and somewhat of a grid is really at the heart of organizing material. So, you know, when you design buildings, you develop a grid that keeps repeating throughout, or unless you're Frank Gehry and everything is all compound curves and all of that. He's unto his own in that respect. But from practical purposes, you know, 90 degrees is better to work at than not 90 degrees, right? For fabrication. So I'm going to go over here to the computer, and I guess it'll all show on the screen if everything goes right. Oh, thanks. Okay, so these are Ollie's InDesign files. These are not his final files, but I just want to do a little demonstration on this, on the typesetting issue. So let's zoom into this spread. Okay, so I'm going to set this type. I'm going to copy this type and put it over here, and I'm going to set it really badly, so you can see the difference. Now I'm not saying that none of you know how to set type, but whoops, I don't know. It's Apple C, Apple V, but what is copy? Is it Alt C? Alt C. Oh, control. What's control? Alt? Oh, control. Sorry for my ignorance here. And then control V for copy. Okay, there we go. All right, I'll do it right next to it. All right, so when you're setting type that's all the same size, you don't want to have too much distance between things. This little guy right here is called a hairline. So he's just put that in there for, it's a detail you can do with type. But let's say he wasn't paying much attention to the way he set this, and he set it maybe like this. This is now tracked at 50. That sounds like a whole big number, but it's not. So I'm going to track it at 0. And now look what happened. It got all kind of bunched together. And then sometimes what people do is they'll set body copy with too much tracking. That's not terrible yet. I got to make it really terrible. It's hard for me to do that. I feel like see, so you never want type to look like that. Because notice how hard it is to read compared to the type right next to it. There's too much space between the letters, and conversely, there's not enough space between the lines, because the distance between the lines is called leading. And that's controlled by this little guy up here. This one. Oh, I have to scroll over it. It's not going to let me do that, but I can change the distance between the lines here. See? So you might like to, this is called very loose leading. So if you wanted to do that, you'd have to go back and take in the tracking, which is this little guy here, and it'll probably look okay. It's just a different feel. So what we call these two things is the way the type colors. So this one looks darker than that one, right? Because it's more dense. So those are just little things that, if you know those things, you always want to consider the tracking. And that's this control right here. I don't know what VA stands for, but that's where you change that number. Conversely, you never want to track body copy too tight because, okay, that's not tight enough yet. So, well, let's make it disgustingly tight. See how it just all, it doesn't read well because now the letters are actually touching each other. Back in, the hand typesetting days, the reason they call it leading is they would put pieces of lead between the lines of type to space them. And they were actually lead, so that's why that's called that. Let's go forward and look at some of the display type. So now I don't think the font is loaded because this is not, okay, so the font isn't loaded because this is DIN. So this is some default font. It's saying it's DIN right up here. So for example, sometimes you want to make something, maybe, oh, he doesn't have the bold. So let's make it light. Oops, he doesn't have light either. Oop, Control Z, is that to bring it back? Yes. So you can control the size of things very easily. Notice how instead of putting lots of space between these rectangles of images, we've grouped them. Our brains are hardwired to see groups more so than things spread out. So if I put these, like, I think it's a much more pleasing layout to have them grouped together all at the same interval than like that. But there may be a reason why you'd have to put captions here right underneath them. But in most cases, if something is clear enough, I think any architect would understand what that was. Here he says it's a concept diagram. Well, I can sort of tell that, but it's nice to have little details. But we'll put it back the way it was. Okay? You might decide to say, well, what would happen if I made this bigger? Now, I don't know if you want to make something bigger and you don't want it to change proportion, what keys do you hit? Does anybody know? Because I only know on Apple. Alt and what?
Drag it with the mouse.
Okay.
Or shift, sorry. Shift.
Oh, shift. All right, there we go. So I might say, well, maybe I want to line it up with that. But the thing you have to remember is once you set your margin at the top, you don't vary it, or if you vary it, it's really different. It's maybe down here instead of up there. You don't want to just change it a little bit because that's what creates the visual organization to the book. Okay? So, and you might say, well, what if I bled this into the gutter? Would that look better? I don't know. You have to, you can try things. Oh, but shouldn't I line this up with that? Isn't that just natural to say, oh, if that's where my line is? So now I've created a unity between these elements because the page, while it's 2 pages, it's one thing because it's seen all at once. So when you're designing facing pages, you always want to design them as if they are one thing, even though they could be many things. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Oh, okay, great. All right. What else can I show you? So, here he's added a little set of numbers, and that just tells me I'm on project 1, and then the next time I go to project 2, the little brackets are going to be around the 2, and they're going to sort of move. So it's little details, and you might think, oh, who cares about all those little details? Charles Eames, who's one of my favorite designers, always said, the details are not the details. The details are the product. It's like you can design a beautiful building, but if somebody puts it together poorly and crafted and doesn't pay attention to detail, it looks terrible. So everything is true of anything that you make, furniture and any product that has to be designed and produced well. So the idea of putting detail into your presentation elevates your work a whole lot. It really does. It has a way of making it look even better than it might be, because you've carefully addressed the different facets of it, you've organized it. So what you've done is you've taken this stack of work that you've done in, what, 5 years? You guys, your program's 5 years, right? Well, my students sometimes go to school 5 years too, so they can't always finish in 4. But your program is 5 years, and it's a lot of work. And to show it and honor it in a way that, you know, is good is a good thing. So let's look at Ollie's website. Do you have any questions about any of this? So if you take a few minutes when you have some free time, I'm sure you have a lot of that, and go on issue, you can go through these books page by page and look at them and see what they did, and appreciate, you know, just the delivery of the information. But yeah.
So if you're like one of those types that has a lot of trouble with white space, how do you deal with
I
that?
beat it out of you.
Deal with that
No, you know,
question?
huh? Oh, the question that he asked, what's your name? Matthew. Matthew asked the question, what if you have a problem with leaving a lot of white space or open space? It actually, negative space helps the design. People think they just have to fill up a page with fill every square inch. And what happens when you do that, and it's okay to do that when the things are all very similar, but if you make a page with, you know, different size things and different elements, you violate the signal to noise ratio principle, which means there's too much going on. So you gradually learn that the white space is your friend. Like here, would that be hard for you to leave that much space there that you see there? Huh? Oh, well, it's kind of one of those things you have to get over. Yeah, it's because you're not, and I know on all your presentation boards for different projects, every square, the same thing with the industrial design students, they have to fill every square inch. But when you're doing this, you want to make it more of, you want to make it a beautiful artifact. And a beautiful design, makes it more of an artifact. You can learn to embrace it. It's not going to change, and it's not going to hurt you. It will allow your presentation to be able, like, I can look at that, and I can look at this floor plan, and I have some breathing room. So all the white space is for visual breathing room, but sometimes we don't leave any white space. I think there's a spread in here that goes right across the whole there. There's no, the white space or negative space is within the drawing itself. But there's the whole, every square inch of the page is filled, but it looks good. So it depends on what you're showing also. So you just have to learn to change the pace, because what happens when you go from large scale to small scale just visually, it creates movement and more interest. If everything was exactly the same size and exactly the same way, you wouldn't want to keep going. Books are meant to be leafed through because they're interesting. So you want to engage someone in looking at your work. But that's a good question. Let me see. Let's see. Let me see if I can find Ollie's website. I gotta look it up. OllieReza-ara.com. So Okay, so there's Ollie's website. I guess this is just like, this is a rollover, so this just sort of automatically rolls over. So now if I want to see his projects, I click on that and I can pick a project. These are called rollovers. Okay, so now if I click on this, I get that project. And it tells me all about that project in detail, just like in the book. But let's say I wanted to get an overview, and I'm going to show you his. Are any of you doing thesis? Yes? Okay, I'll show you his thesis book in a minute. So here's his portfolio, which you just saw on issue. You embed that into your website, so then they could see your portfolio. They want to. You're just giving people options, which is nice. Everybody likes options. How do I get back to? How do I go back? Here. Okay, here we go. I want to go back to his website. Do I have to go to, oh, here we go. All right, let's look at his thesis book. So Ollie took a lot of the things that he learned in the class, and he was actually doing his book in tandem with his portfolio. So he kept it very simple. See, now here I'd have to say he set his type. This type is set too loosely. There's too much space between individual letters on this. He forgot to use his same settings from his book, but I'll forgive him for that. So he might have had a start on this before he started taking portfolio. I've never actually physically seen his thesis, so I guess there's a lot to put in that. All right, so you can also see that he found some fun stock photography. So if we were to look at, I don't think Samantha has her website up, and I wonder if Nilu would, but everyone comes out of the deal with the website, all the materials, everything you need to go get an interview. So I'd love to answer some questions if you have some. You're very quiet. No questions? Well, I guess we might be finished then. I'm happy to talk to any of you individually, or if you want to stay and look at some more stuff, we can look at some more stuff together. But basically, what I've sort of mapped out for you is that it's not difficult to design a book that looks like a professional designer designed it. You can very easily, with just a few moves, knowing how to make, and after a while it just sort of comes naturally after you do it on several projects, you can just apply that to anything that you're doing. Okay? So, very good. Thank you.